This is AUGforums.com Real Talk. First, thank you to our sponsors, APS Payments, Kenzium, and DataSelf. You can learn more about how our sponsors work with Acumatica by going to augforums.com/sponsors. My name is Tim Rodman, and I'm coming to you live on Wednesday, October 14th, 2020. This is episode number 28. Darren Francis, Finance Manager at Sun Oil Limited, sharing his Acumatica customer story. Darren, thanks for joining us today, and I'll let you go ahead and introduce yourself.
Thank you, Tim. I have been with Sun Oil for about 14 years. I started in 2006 as a financial controller. But prior to that, I worked at PricewaterhouseCoopers as an auditor from about 2002 up to 2006, just before I came over to Sun Oil. So as an external auditor at PwC, I worked on a variety of companies, insurance, some consumer, retail, and also did a little bit of oil and gas, some fuel distribution companies as well. I did not work on Sun Oil prior to that, but interesting story about it is actually prior to Sun Oil becoming Sun Oil, they purchased it. It was previously Shell Bahamas Limited. And my father was actually employed at Shell Bahamas many years prior to that. So he, I like to say I'm a second generation member of Sun Oil through Shell Bahamas. But that's pretty much my intro. That's how I got here.
So you're down in the Bahamas off the coast of Florida. I don't know much about the Bahamas other than it's a great vacation spot, I'm sure. But is oil a big, one of the top industries down there along with tourism, or what are things like in general down there?
Well, tourism, our biggest industry would be tourism, and followed by financial services. Come in is really just on the distribution side. We don't have any refining capacity in the Bahamas. The last refinery that we had was on another island in Grand Bahama, which is part of the Bahamas. But that was dismantled sometime in the mid to late 2000s. So I think around 2008 or 9, it may have been dismantled. So right now oil and gas in terms of distribution is pretty big business. For our company, we actually, we are the licensee for Shell in the Bahamas and Turks and Caicos Islands, which is a sister island chain, which is just immediately to our southeast. And they are still, Turks and Caicos, of course, still a British colony, but we are an independent nation, which is very close to them. So we've historically, Shell Bahamas had supplied to them, to Turks and Caicos, and we just continued that through Sun Oil.
So your distribution is primarily bring into the Bahamas and Turks and Caicos.
That's correct. Yeah, we would import gasoline, diesel, propane, and lubricants, and we would distribute that throughout the Bahamas and Turks and Caicos.
Gotcha. Sounds interesting. Is it a complicated business, or you've been there for quite a while. Do you feel like you've got a handle on things, or is it still something that has a lot of challenge to understanding it?
It has its challenges. I mean, on the surface, a lot of people would probably think that it's a very simple business. And I guess at some level it is. You just bring in the product and we sell the product. But there are a lot of other things, a lot of moving parts that are going on with that. So, for example, we, like I mentioned, we are the licensees for Shell in the Bahamas and Turks and Caicos. And as a part of that responsibility, we also oversee the retail sites in the Bahamas, throughout the Bahamas and the Turks and Caicos. We have about that includes about 16 sites on the island of New Providence, which is one of the islands. And we may have another 16 or 17 throughout other islands in the Bahamas island chain. And then we have about 3 more sites in Turks and Caicos. And that overseeing those sites includes just making sure too that they uphold the Shell brand. Um, they maintain the various quality standards that Shell would expect. And then, as a part of that, we manage the license fees and things like that we would have to pay to Shell on a quarterly basis. So there's a logistical aspect to we bring in product into New Providence, but it has to get to lots of smaller islands, which has its own operation in terms of trying to figure out which ports you can get into based on what load of the ship and the time of day based on the tide, those kinds of logistical challenges, and just making sure that we can distribute to our depots in those islands as well as directly to some customers that may be on private keys throughout the Bahamas. So there's a lot of things going on there behind the scenes.
At any type of distribution side, I guess at a high level, it does sound simple, supply, demand, but you drill down and supply chains can get real complicated real fast, especially when you've got multiple layers to it. And then I think a lot of people have realized that with COVID, just getting some simple things nowadays could be a challenge. I'm curious how COVID has impacted you all. I assume the demand for fuel has decreased, and what does that do to your business?
Yeah, it's been particularly difficult. The government here in the Bahamas had taken pretty drastic steps early on in terms of, I think, pretty much from the middle of March up until maybe the end of May. Most places were kind of shut down, with the only exceptions being food stores, pharmacies, and gas stations. So while we still had quite a bit of product moving in terms of and gas stations. So while we still had quite a bit of product moving in terms of dealing with the retail market and servicing the various gas stations. But one big hit that happened that hasn't recovered yet is the hotels. We service most, if not all of the major hotels in the Bahamas. And the hotels have been closed pretty much from the onset of the pandemic around the middle of March. And they have not, without, except for maybe just minor maintenance, fueling and things like that, they have not been open for any significant business at all. They're in the process of trying to reopen 2021 to late 2021, depending on where they are. So it's not, the tourism sector has been pretty bleak, and that's been an area that's affected us in terms of large volumes, just kind of disappearing overnight, so that's been our challenge recently.
Yeah, my heart goes out to you guys. Any type of economy heavily dependent on tourism right now. Just fingers crossed that COVID ends as soon as possible. We can get back to normal.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been tough, and we are saying that from the standpoint of being, we've had the benefit of being an essential service that really has operated nonstop. We still, like I said, we still have been servicing the gas stations, and we've been operating straight through for since the pandemic hit. And it's still, even for us, it's been difficult. But a lot of people may not realize that, not really understanding the depth of our business. But the tourism industry is the number one industry, and that affects everybody. So everybody is feeling that, even those who are considered essential.
Well, I always like hearing the background of both the people and the businesses that are involved with Acumatica. Turning the corner into the Acumatica side of things. When did you implement Acumatica, and what were you running? Actually, maybe we start with what you were running prior to that, and what kind of challenges you had with that prior system. About when did you implement Acumatica, and what were you running? Actually, maybe we start with what you were running prior to that, and what kind of challenges you had with that prior system.
Okay. Well, up until we would have changed over to Acumatica in December of 2017. Prior to that, we were running a terminal, basically a terminal management software that had an accounting system attached to it. It was a company called Commercial Computer Services, CCS. They're now CCS Technology. The interesting thing is we had discussions with them for many years, because we were using that software from about June or July 2006 up until December 2017. And I would have joined in November of 2006. So I would just been dealing with CCS straight through. But that system, I guess we got to a point where we kind of outgrew it in terms of being able to have customizable reports, and just generally, having the ability to manage different aspects of the business. And as we look into different sectors, being able to being more suited to handle, different businesses in general, as opposed to being more terminal centric, or more focused on the terminal management side. That's kind of prompted some discussions with them in, I think maybe about 2015, 2016, we had discussion. And we realized that over time, the level of support was going down, because the developers of that original system, were older guys. They were starting to retire and move out. So the ability for them to continue to manage and support that software was becoming an issue. While in the meantime, we wanted to do more with it. Maintaining the existing support was going to be a challenge. So we realized we had to make a move from quite a while back. But I guess we were trying to figure out exactly where to go. It just happened too that CCS was kind of transitioning away from that software managing that software into being more of a support role. And they were looking at that CCS was kind of transitioning away from that software managing that software into being more of a support role. And they were looking at Acumatica in terms of becoming a VAR. And they pitched it to us in terms of looking at this Acumatica software, because we were looking at the time, we were looking at Sage and I believe NetSuite. And then at the same time, they brought up Acumatica. And, we had some preliminary looks at it. We were quite impressed with it. We came out to the summit. I think that was early for 2017. We went there in January 2017. We were quite impressed with the presentation of the software and what they had to offer. And we decided shortly after um, into the Acumatica family.
You said terminal management software. I'm
Mm-hmm.
not familiar with that term. Maybe you could tell us a little bit more about what terminal management means.
Right. So the terminal management software was more it's more based on fuel terminals. So if you have a fuel terminal, if you think about a fuel terminal having large fuel tanks, um, in the US, they are, you can have a terminal that is shared where various persons will come and, trucks, smaller trucks will pull up, fuel delivery trucks will pull up, and they will load fuel for their various customers. Um, I think in the States they call those jobbers. But for we would own in the Bahamas, we actually own the terminal. Only our trucks would fuel at those terminals for the most part and deliver to our customers. So it's like a privately owned terminal with with its own set of customers. So that software kind of manages the terminal in terms of the inventory. It links with another piece of software that would handle the loading of the trucks. And once the load is completed, it would send that information um, to CCS in order to produce the invoices for the customers. So that software was well suited for that type of operation. Um, Unfortunately, though, that's only one aspect. It's a big aspect, but it's not the entire operation. Um, so it had its so it you know it had its limitations.
So when you went live then with Acumatica, did you just go live with the financials and continue to use the existing terminal management solution, or how'd that process work?
No, we were actually quite ambitious. um, we there were a couple of things happening around that time, and I guess it was we pretty much went with the financial and the distribution at the same time. Um, we were initially planned to go live on August 1st of 2017, which would have been the start of our new fiscal year. But we had a lot of challenges around that time trying to meet that deadline. And given that we were pretty much doing we were kind of going whole hog into Acumatica. It was a bit, in hindsight, it was a bit much to do all of that in a matter of months, pretty much from signing on, maybe from February up until August. That was a lot of work to do. Um, and not only that, we were adding additional systems to help with interfacing with Acumatica. So for example, I mentioned the software that would have loaded, that would have provided information once the trucks loaded their fuel on and sent that to then CCS. We wanted to use that to send the information out to Acumatica. That was an existing software that was not so bad. But we were also implementing at the same time a delivery software where for those customers that we may load a bulk of, like for propane, for example, we would load an entire truck and we would deliver from that truck, we would deliver to maybe 10 or more customers out of that same truck. We couldn't use the loading software that was done for the fuel, for the gasoline and diesel. We had to use a different type of software that would be able to produce invoices on delivery. And so we had tested and tried that out in the midst of trying to implement Acumatica as well. So there was interfacing that we had to learn with that, um, as well as looking at various aspects that we had never done before, like fixed assets and project management. So we took a pretty ambitious step step all in all with trying to jump. We jumped in wholesale with Acumatica. I have to say it was a bit rough at first. There were a lot of pain points and difficulties, but I think we just continue to work through it. VAR stuck with us and Acumatica stuck with us, and we continue to just, keep working at it. And I think we've now gotten to a point where I think it's a lot cleaner and a lot more better. We're getting a lot more information that we would have gotten before.
So even though it was bumpy when you flipped the switch in Acumatica, at that point there was no more terminal management CCS software.
Right. We did a clean break at pretty much on that was what was the actual date. We cut that Friday and went into Acumatica that Monday and didn't look back. For better or worse.
Yeah. Ripped the Band-Aid off.
yeah. Just we did. Yeah, it was pretty rough. But I think it was we knew it was something we had to do. Because you have that, I guess it's interesting. We used to have complaints about the previous software. People were saying that we need to do more with it. But it's interesting when you get to the point of actually making the change, people are still afraid to make the change. They're still holding on. And I actually heard a comment shortly after we changed to say that, well, the older system wasn't that bad, It's like, I'm like, really? The older system wasn't that bad, It's like, I'm like, really? Are you serious? Like,
the grass is always greener, isn't it?
Yeah.
I find that so true. Even when you move on to a new ERP, all of a sudden that old system becomes a lot better in your eyes than it used to be. I think that's pretty typical.
Yeah, I guess they say better the devil you know, right? So, yeah.
I'm interested on the distribution side. So when you flip the switch, were you using just regular Acumatica distribution with warehouses and warehouse locations to track all that, or did you have to do customizations on top of that?
That part was highly customized. Like I mentioned, there was a terminal. There were actually two systems that were customized to fit into that into the distribution module in Acumatica. So it basically works where it takes the ordering system, sends it to those systems, depending on what type of order it is. And then those systems will process the loading or the delivery, depending on, which one it is, then send that information back to Acumatica to complete the shipment and to complete the invoicing part of it. And then there's automations in there for automating the shipment and invoicing completion. Yeah.
Very interesting. So you customize both. You customize what Acumatica is doing inside of Acumatica, and then you did some custom interfaces to pass data back and forth to other systems.
Yeah. And
very interesting.
Yeah. So it was our software provider to now our VAR. They had a good knowledge of our business in terms of what we were trying to accomplish, what we did. They've been working with us for many years, so they knew our business inside out. So they were able to coordinate a little better than I think someone coming in, completely green.
Yeah, that makes sense. That industry knowledge is huge.
Yeah. And they had been in the industry for a while, so they were quite, like I said, they're quite familiar with the players in there, and in terms of learning, how it applies to our situation.
So you mentioned their CCS is actually the ones who brought Acumatica to you and stuck with it. Do you know if they then took what they built and So you mentioned their CCS is actually the ones who brought Acumatica to you and stuck with it. Do you know if they then took what they built and made it available as more of an ISV type of product for other fuel distributors?
As far as I know, they have, well, I can't say. I haven't seen it anywhere in, but I would imagine, I know they do have other customers in the fuel industry. So I would imagine if they are getting them over to Acumatica, they would probably offer that. Yeah.
Yeah, the reason I ask is it's a very interesting scenario to me that Acumatica makes possible, in that, as you mentioned, that knowing your business was such a critical component to that. And there's just so many of these what I would call niche industries. I was talking to a friend the other day who does auditing only for tribal casinos in the U.S., and that they've got their own unique stuff that they deal with, right? And
Yeah.
there's so many of these legacy software products that are built specifically for those niche industries. And as you mentioned, the support starts to get a little more difficult as everyone's retiring, right? And they don't want to retool the whole product, so it just kind of dies on the vine. And then Acumatica just has that compelling story to be able to offer you not just the ERP system, but a development platform that you can actually develop on and allow you to reboot your product on new technology. I guess even the whole Acumatica Manufacturing Edition was really that story. It was essentially a VAR who had built a product for another ERP system, then the VAR with the industry expertise, and now becoming an ISV, building a solution to replace their legacy solution. I just think it's a real compelling story for so many different industries like yours.
Yeah, I definitely agree. The thing I really like with Acumatica is it's kind of like a blank canvas in terms of having that development aspect that is and it's highly customizable. So you could really make it into what you need it to be, and having that flexibility as long as you know the code and you know how to code it, you know, there's a lot of possibilities. That's what I really like.
Yeah, it's a double-edged sword there, right? I think for your business, that's really what you were looking for. Where I found it be maybe not such a good fit, such a good fit is someone who's really looking for just QuickBooks, or maybe a little step up from QuickBooks. Then all that power, it can be a little too much, right? It's like you're trying to drive a race car when you don't even have a driver's license yet.
Yeah, you have to find a way to tone it down, I guess. Yeah.
But it sounds like it's been a great fit for you guys. I mean, so over the last few years, where are you at now in terms of, are you still ambitiously pressing forward with new projects and bringing new things into Acumatica, or have things settled down a bit for you?
Oh yeah, no, we have it's settled down a bit, but we have again, we pretty ambitious. So there's very little that kind of settles with us. We're always looking to push and add more things. And particularly our managing director, he is of the mind that we should try and do as much as we can in Acumatica. In fact, his tagline at one point was "No more Excel spreadsheets," which for accountants is an extremely tall feat. Uh, uh, in fact, we had a joke the other day. Another accountant in one of the other divisions was basically saying, you can't get rid of Excel spreadsheets. There's no way. You have to have some Excel spreadsheets, you know. But we have been ambitious in trying to really pursue that. For myself, I've been pushing away from it and trying to, each time if I create something in Excel, I'm asking myself, can we do this in Acumatica, or how can we get this in Acumatica? So I see there's still more for me to do in terms of report side, in terms of doing the financial reports and getting more, getting Acumatica to do more of those kinds of things. Um, there's definitely more in terms of additional modules. I think one day we'd want to do human resources in there. That's a big piece that's not in Acumatica at this point. Um, there's just much more that we could be doing. And then even as our businesses, we get into different businesses, those will, I'm sure, will have elements that we need to look at with customization. So, that's just, I see it as there's a wide open field. There's more to do, but we've done quite
You're
a bit so
mentioning
far.
you're mentioning human resources reminds me. I always like to ask whether or not you can respect the number of employees, if that's information you're able to share.
Um, I would say, um, ballpark, we could probably say in the low nine figures in terms of revenue. Um, and employees, I would say somewhere in the employees would probably be about, if we're looking at the entire group, probably we may have about close to maybe about 300 employees. That's spread among the Bahamas, Turks and Caicos, and that's not just Sun Oil, but that would be part of our entire group. Sun Oil is actually part of that would be part of our entire group. Sun Oil is actually part of the focal group of companies, which is actually traded on the Bahamas International Securities Exchange. So we're an entire group of maybe about 13 companies, and all told, would probably be low to mid nine figure revenue and about 500, anywhere from 3 to 500 employees.
And is that whole group now running Acumatica or just Sun Oil Limited?
The whole group, actually. Yeah,
Wow.
like I said, we were very ambitious. We put everybody on basically around the same time, within about a year, from late 2017 up until 2018, 2019. We were adding. We had all those various companies go on. Some are smaller than others, so some would just be using just the financials side of it. The highly integrated ones would probably be something more like Sun Oil, where we'd be using, the finance and distribution and projects and fixed assets. Yeah. And then we still are in the process, like in terms of getting one or two of the other companies to do more integrations with Acumatica, because they have different needs in terms of being on a retail side. They will need more integration for retail service stations into Acumatica. So we're actually in the process of revamping that.
Hey, you guys move fast. You're definitely bucking my stereotypes of any island culture, whether it's the Bahamas or Hawaii or any type of island. I'm just picturing, laid back, sitting, maybe work a few hours a day. That's
Yeah,
situation.
that's quite the opposite. Yeah, there's never really a dull moment around. Yeah, so that's good. Certainly keeps you on your toes and keep your skills sharp.
I really like your Excel comment. I think that is such a difficult thing to achieve culturally in an organization. But the question I heard you ask, to me, is a key one, in that maybe you don't actually eliminate every Excel spreadsheet. I think that's maybe impossible to do, in my opinion. But just the fact that you are at a point where you ask yourself the question, do I actually need this in Excel, or can I do it in Acumatica? to me, culturally, that is a key right there. That you have the awareness and you're even asking the question, because many people just go off and create Excel spreadsheets. They don't even think about it, and that's how they wind up in the tangled mess of Excel spreadsheets.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So it's definitely like it's. I know there are some reports I still need to create, and it's just my problem is probably just having the time to do it at this point, with all that's going on. But I could see at least 2 or 3 more things that I could do um, in Acumatica that would make our processes much easier. And then we even doing more in terms of budgeting, trying to get our budgets now. We've just started doing that, bringing those into Acumatica, um, into Acumatica. So that it just continues. We continue to try and press and see how we can get maximum utilization. I think that's the key word right there, because one thing we got when we were starting to change, to go over to Acumatica, one of the things that was made clear to us by our president and the managing director, they said they want to get maximum utilization of Acumatica. So anything that you see that needs to happen or that could happen in Acumatica, let's find a way to do it. Let Acumatica be that record, that single record where we have all the information. Because that was always a problem before. I would, in the previous system, I would have some information, and then, operations, they would be dealing with they would have some other information, and we're constantly trying to reconcile the two. And shown for Acumatica, they talked about one system of record. And I think that was a light bulb came on, like, wow, that was one of the things that kind of attracted us, because that solves so many problems. Everybody just is looking at one system of record. And that makes collaboration so much easier, and points of reference. We look at that, go into Acumatica, we get the information we need. And everybody's on the same page.
You said something else that was a little bit of a light bulb for me. You said 2 or 3 things. It makes me wonder, culturally in your organization, did you approach this as this giant multi-year roadmap where you planned it way out and you've been executing on it ever since? Or is just your culture to be always looking for those next 2 or 3 things that you could bring into Acumatica?
It was a bit of both, actually. Some of these things you kind of learn as you're getting in, and you see it as you get in, that we wouldn't have initially planned for. But when we were looking at the initial rollout, we kind of had everybody put together all the things that they would want to have in the system, or that they would want to see in the system, in a new system. And that list was huge. So we kind of had to look at that and prioritize and say, well, look, maybe we could do this now. What is priority? What are the key things we need to do for the initial implementation? And then what are the other things that we could live with until we could get to a point where we can get to those? And so we have that list that we are continuously working on and kind of developing, that we're executing on. But every now and then you're seeing some little things here, and I'm like, hey, yeah, maybe we could do that. We could put this here, and but wouldn't have been apparent earlier, in all of the jumble and mess that we had before. Not that it was a complete mess, but it's just that it was, you spend so much time trying to reconcile or do other things that you would have missed some opportunities before.
Yeah, I just think it's interesting that type of approach you have, and that you're just not satisfied. You're always tweaking things. I'd say that's very much the Acumatica company culture as well, right?
Yes.
The one hand, you do have that large, broad roadmap that you're aiming for, but in my opinion, what really makes you move fast is the second piece, and that you're just not satisfied, and you're constantly willing to tweak things, rather than just say that, well, if it's not on that roadmap, it doesn't exist. That you do have those two sides that you're looking at.
Yeah, yeah. You have to remain nimble. And one thing I like with Acumatica, that like you said, they're constantly developing. So, the idea of having regular updates to the software is great. The fact that they engage the users in a tangible way with the feedback website, I constantly go on there and check it out every now and then to see, um, what new things might, persons are saying in the community. And sometimes as soon as I think of something, I go there and I may put in one or two suggestions myself. um, it's a great, it's good to see that evolution and constant development. And then, seeing when the releases come out, the new features that come out that have been quite helpful. We just recently did an upgrade to 2019 R2, and we completed that in February of this year. And that, kind of unlocked more benefits for Acumatica for us. So, some things that we had some issues with when we were previously on 6.1. Some of those things got cleared up, particularly in terms of the purchase orders, purchase receipts, and receiving those kinds of things have been have been much improved. So, we were quite impressed with the latest version.
Based on all the moving pieces you have and customizations, where do you think you're at right now? Are you just trying to upgrade maybe every couple of years or every year? What kind of cadence do you think you'll fall into for the next upgrade?
That's a good question. We haven't really talked about it. And I would think though, we don't want to push it too much. So maybe, maybe we look at every year and a half. We may be on the outer end. We don't want to do it. I don't think we want to do it as frequently as every year. That might be a bit much. So we might be a year and a half. But I know Acumatica tends to not want to have you go beyond 2 years. That could tend to be a problem with support. So I would say probably that sweet spot, maybe a year and a half. But we'll have
Yeah,
to
that
look
makes
at
sense.
Yeah, because the biggest thing is just making sure, the key is for us is just making sure that the customizations that we've done at this point, seeing is that even in the last upgrade, they worked to kind of clean those up and make those a little more seamless. So, there's been improvement on the actual connectors, the customizations that were made. So that going forward, the whole upgrade process will be an easier process too.
So you mentioned the customizations already. What about where you're at now? Did you end up bringing in any ISV products or things like reporting or additional functionality, or is it just the customization?
We have been exploring the reporting side of it. So we are looking at, we're in the process of looking at an ISV. Maybe we were looking at Data Self. And so we're looking at, trying to really get that in, and that provides a lot of information in a great way that's particularly nice for our sales team. So we're trying to see how best we can get everything hooked up. It's just some pieces on the back end we have to work on to get that going. But yeah, we are constantly on the hunt, and we keep our eyes open for any potential ISV solutions.
And you mentioned budgeting a little bit ago. Was that just inside of Acumatica, or is there another custom or ISV piece for that?
That is all within Acumatica at this point. Yeah, yeah. We've really, I guess we've kind of revamped the budgeting process in a general way internally. So we wanted to give it a try and see how it would work with using the Acumatica function. We want to give it a try and see how it would work with using the Acumatica functionality. And if we see there's anything else that we need to do, or if there's any other ISVs that might assist with that, we might look at at possibly engaging them to do that. But I think it's going to be a process that evolves over time, that we would want to definitely want to make as seamless as possible.
And I always like asking this to accountants in the reporting and budgeting area. When you initially implemented Acumatica, one of those key decisions that you have to decide is your chart of account structure, both the accounts and the sub-accounts and the segments. What you landed on there, is that something that you still use today, or if you're familiar with the reporting process?
We still use it today. The initial chart, we would have made one or two adjustments with the chart of accounts, the main top level chart. The sub account structure is basically the same, that we continue to use. I do get requests for, it's the chart of account structure is not as detailed as we had under our previous software. So we are looking at, do we need to add another, more range of accounts to it? I kind of liked the simplicity of it, but if we may need to expand it a bit more to get the information that persons need, to make their decisions. But it's like anything else, it's a work in progress. And I don't see it for staying in one place forever. We will definitely have to make some changes. It's just a matter of when and how.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah, I also like asking accountants. To me, this is very similar to the difficulty of prying Excel out of the hands of an accountant. It's also difficult to get accounting to report on something other than the general ledger. I'm curious, in your experience, is most of your reporting driven off of that general ledger structure, or are you also comfortable going into the sub-modules and just running your reporting off of that instead?
I use a bit of both. Yeah. So I've gotten comfortable with the sub ledgers. So I'm comfortable with either one. Yeah.
I think you are ahead of most accountants, both in terms of being comfortable with sub ledgers. That's great.
Yeah, I appreciate. I could definitely appreciate having that sub ledger structure, and I guess with an accountant you're still used to the general ledger is kind of like home base and you're comfortable with it, but as I spend more time with it, I definitely get more comfortable with that process.
Yeah, to me, it's not only a level of comfort and a level of knowledge, it's also a level of control. You have more control over the general ledger than you do the other modules, right? So, yeah. I mean, I can understand why it is that way. I just think there's so much more that you can get when you go into the other sub-modules and when you involve other tools like a data self to make that process easier. It makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah.
Well, Darren, I really appreciate the time today. I know we're coming up against the top of our hour. Any other things you can think of to add in terms of maybe even tips for someone implementing Acumatica, or other things you want to highlight about your Acumatica journey here?
I would say, but I guess one thing that kind of came to mind when we talked about Excel, I had a motivation for getting off of Excel as an accountant. I would admit, because prior to this, I was using Excel to basically recreate cost of sales, and that was an involved process. So we would actually use kind of download all of the purchases information, kind of recreating cost of goods sold, revaluing inventory and FIFO order all in Excel. And basically it took us about 2 weeks to do financials at the earliest. And it could take us more than a month to complete it at the latest. Now with Acumatica, we're actually down to, if we really pushed it 1 month, we really pushed it, we were able to get it done within 7 days. But our goal is really within 7 to 10 days to have the financials completed, which for our operation is pretty impressive considering, having to liaise with so many different parts of the business and getting everybody done on time. In terms of tips, I guess for implementation, I would just say, just try to find a VAR that can really understand your business. That's important because, they can appreciate the nuances that might be specific to your business, but then also bring, if they have good industry experience, they could also bring some, they could temper that with an understanding of maybe some alternatives to how you would want it. Not in a way to counteract what you're saying, but just to give you a better perspective. And, it might enlighten you to an opportunity that you may not have seen before to change a process or to improve a process. So those would be my biggest takeaways from it.
That's great advice. And I really appreciate you taking the time to come on today. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Tim. It was fun.
Thanks for listening and take care.